The receptionist at Maple Way Learning Center didn't ask for my ID anymore. She just gave me the pitying smile reserved for overwhelmed mothers. Even though I was only the aunt, at 33, I had built a career at Arbor Crest. Yet my real full-time job seemed to be cleaning up the wreckage of my sister's life. When Tessa texted that she was stuck again, I didn't feel angry. I just felt the heavy, suffocating certainty that I was drowning in someone else's chaos. The fluorescent lights of the Arbor Crest Health Network administrative wing always seemed to hum louder after 5 in the afternoon. It was the sound of the building emptying out, the professional world winding down, leaving behind only the people who had too much to do and not enough hours to do it. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating a spreadsheet that could have easily taken another hour of my attention, but my phone vibrated against the mahogany veneer. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. My body knew. A familiar tightness coiled in my stomach. A physical Pavlovian response developed over a decade of sisterhood. I looked anyway. Stuck at an appointment. Total nightmare. Can you grab the crew? I will be there by 6. It was 5:15. I stared at the message. My sister, Tessa, lived her life in a perpetual state of surprised chaos. Appointments ran late, tires went flat, lines were unexpectedly long, and people were inexplicably rude. The universe conspired against her punctuality. Or so the story went. I typed back, I am still at work. The response came 3 seconds later. Please, Claire, the late fee is $1 a minute after 5:30. I don't have it. There it was. The financial guilt trip wrapped in a crisis. If I said no, I was not just inconveniencing her. I was costing her money she did not have. I was taking food out of my nieces' and nephews' mouths. I closed the spreadsheet. I packed my laptop bag. I walked out of the office where I was respected, where I was the associate director of community outreach, and I got into my sedan to drive toward the role I had never applied for, the default parent. Maple Way Learning Center was a cheerful, primary-colored building on the east side of Briar Glen. It smelled of bleach and graham crackers. When I walked in, the receptionist, Mrs. Higgins, did not ask for my identification. She did not check the list of authorized guardians. She simply looked up from her ledger, adjusted her glasses, and gave me a smile that was heavy with pity. You are here again, the smile said. Hi, Mrs. Higgins, I said, forcing a brightness I did not feel. Just grabbing the wood tribe. She sighed, a soft sound that felt like a judgment. You know, Claire, we usually require the primary parent to do pickup at least once a week just to keep the files current. We have not seen Tessa in 10 days. The shame flushed hot up my neck. It was not my shame, but I carried it. I was the one standing at the counter. I was the one wearing the business suit in a room full of finger paintings. Absorbing the criticism meant for my sister. She has been working odd hours. I lied. It rolled off my tongue with practiced ease. It will settle down soon. Mrs. Higgins nodded, but her eyes remained skeptical. Just remind her that we close promptly at 6. We cannot keep asking the staff to stay late. I walked back to the yellow room and the blue room, gathering the troops. There were 5 of them. Noah was 12, old enough to be embarrassed by everything, but young enough to look relieved when he saw me. Sarah was 10, clutching a book. Ben and Jerry, the 7-year-old twins, were vibrating with excess energy, and little Mia, barely 3, was sitting on a rug with a thumb in her mouth. Auntie Claire. The chorus was the only thing that kept me from screaming. They swarmed me, a tangle of sticky hands and high-pitched voices. They smelled like sweat and playground dirt. I loved them. I loved them with a ferocity that often terrified me because I knew, deep down, that this love was the lever my family used to pry open my boundaries. Hey guys, I said, hoisting Mia onto my hip. She felt heavier than last week. Grab your bags. Mom got held up. So we are going to my place for a bit. We herded out to my car. It was a tight squeeze. I had bought a mid-sized SUV 2 years ago. Not because I enjoyed driving a larger vehicle, but because I could not fit all my sister's children in my old compact sedan. I had made a major financial purchase based on the hypothetical necessity of transporting children that were not mine. The drive to my apartment in Briar Glen was short. The kids knew the drill. They did not ask where their mother was. They did not ask why she was late. They had adapted to the ecosystem of Tessa's chaos. Inside my apartment, the energy shifted. My home was quiet, organized, and decorated in cool grays and soft creams. It was a sanctuary that was regularly invaded. Noah immediately went to the dining table and pulled out his math homework. He did not ask for help. He just looked at me, waiting. He knew I would check it. He knew Tessa would not. Sarah went to the bookshelf where I kept a stash of graphic novels specifically for her. The twins dove for the basket of Legos I kept under the coffee table. I moved to the kitchen to start making macaroni and cheese. It was automatic. I did not have to think. I was a machine of provision. "Aunt Claire?" Noah called from the table. "Yeah. Bud? I need $20 for the field trip on Friday. Mom said to ask you—" I froze, the box of pasta in my hand. "She said to ask me?" I repeated, keeping my voice even. "Yeah. She said you are the rich one." The words hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Noah did not mean it as an insult. He was just repeating the facts as they had been presented to him. To a 12-year-old, a steady paycheck and a clean apartment looked like wealth. To Tessa, my solvency was an endless resource she could mine whenever she hit a vein of bad luck. I walked over to my purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and handed it to him. "Give this to your teacher tomorrow," I said. "Do not give it to your mom. Put it right in your backpack." He nodded. Understanding the subtext, we were conspirators in his survival. Tessa did not arrive at 6. She did not arrive at 7. We ate dinner. I bathed Mia because she had a sticky substance in her hair that looked like gum. I checked Noah's math. I listened to Sarah read a chapter of her book. I refereed a wrestling match between Ben and Jerry. At 8:15, the buzzer rang. When I opened the door, Tessa stood there, breathless, her hair in a messy bun that was supposed to look chic but just looked frazzled. She smelled of vanilla perfume and something else. Excitement? "Oh my God, I am so sorry," she said, rushing past me to hug Mia, who was already half asleep on the sofa. The appointment went forever, and then traffic was a nightmare. "You are a lifesaver. Claire." Seriously. St. Clair. She did not ask if they had eaten. She assumed. She did not ask about homework. She assumed. "Noah needs a permission slip signed for Friday," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I gave him the money. You just need to sign the paper." Tessa waved a hand dismissively. "I will do it in the morning. Come on, monsters, let's go." She gathered them up, a whirlwind of energy that disrupted the calm I had spent 2 hours building. As she herded them out the door, she paused and looked back at me. "By the way, Mom is organizing a dinner on Thursday. She said it is important. You are coming, right?" I crossed my arms. "Thursday is tough. Tessa, we have the quarterly review prep at work." "Don't be like that," she said, her voice dropping into a whine. "It is really important." Mom sounded serious. "Just come." "For me?" She flashed that smile, the one that had gotten her out of speeding tickets and into bad relationships and through 35 years of life without ever truly hitting the ground. "I will see," I said. She took that as a yes. She always did. The calendar invite hit my inbox the next morning at 10. Subject: family dinner. Important. Location: Mom and Dad's house. Time: Thursday, 6:30 p.m. There was no body text, just the header. In the Wood Family Dictionary, the word important was a loaded term. It usually meant someone was sick, someone was in debt, or someone needed a cosigner. Given that my parents were in good health and I was the only one with a credit score above 700, I knew exactly who the target audience for this meeting was. I stared at the screen. I could decline. I could click the little red no button and stay at work. I could go home, pour a glass of wine, and watch a documentary in silence. But I wouldn't. I was the reliable one. I was the structure that held the house up. If I walked away, the roof would cave in, and the people underneath, specifically 5 innocent children, would get crushed. I clicked yes. Thursday arrived with a gray, persistent drizzle that matched my mood. I left Arbor Crest late, rushing through the slick streets of Briar Glen to get to my parents' house on the north side of town. The house was a 2-story colonial that looked picture-perfect from the curb, the kind of house that suggested stability and traditional values. Inside, the walls held decades of passive-aggressive silence and performative happiness. I parked behind my father's sedan. Tessa's battered minivan was not there yet. Of course, I walked in through the side door. The kitchen smelled of pot roast and anxiety. My mother, Diane, was at the stove, stirring gravy with a manic intensity. My father, Gerald, was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a scotch. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, shaking the rain off my umbrella. "Claire, you made it." My mother turned, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked tired, her eyes darting to the clock. "Your sister is running a little behind." "She is always running a little behind," I said, placing my purse on the counter. "Can I help with anything?" "Just set the table. Honey, use the good china." That meant this was a State of the Union address. I went to the dining room and began laying out the plates with the gold rims. The silence in the house was heavy. My father came in and poured himself another drink, offering the bottle toward me. "I'm good. Thanks," I said. He grunted. "Work going okay?" "It is busy. We are launching a new maternal health initiative next month." "That is nice," he said, his eyes glazing over. He did not ask what it was. He did not ask about my role in it. He just wanted to fill the air until the main event arrived. We waited for 40 minutes. My mother kept the roast warm in the oven, her cheerfulness becoming more brittle with every tick of the grandfather clock. Finally, at 7:15, the front door burst open. "Here we are." "Sorry." The car wouldn't start, and then we had to stop for gas. Tessa swept into the room, followed by the 5 kids. She looked radiant. That was the thing about Tessa. Chaos seemed to feed her, giving her a glow that the rest of us lost in the friction of dealing with her. She was wearing a loose, flowery dress I hadn't seen before. "Hi, everyone." "Hi, Claire Bear," she chirped, kissing my cheek. We sat down. The kids were surprisingly well behaved, likely bribed with promises of dessert. My mother served the roast, her hands trembling slightly. "So," Tessa said, after the potatoes had been passed, "you are probably wondering why we gathered everyone here." My father cleared his throat. My mother clasped her hands under her chin, her eyes shimmering with tears. I put my fork down. I knew this energy. It was the energy of a reveal. I looked at Tessa. She was beaming. She looked from Dad to Mom, and then her eyes landed on me. "I am turning a corner," she said. "I really feel it this time. And—" she paused for dramatic effect. "We are going to need a bigger table. I am pregnant. Number 6 is on the way." The room seemed to tilt. My father let out a loud, nervous laugh, slapping the table. "Well, look at that. A full basketball team plus a sub." My mother let out a sob of joy. "Oh, Tessa, a baby, a blessing." They stood up to hug her. The kids looked confused but happy because the adults were happy. Noah, the 12-year-old, looked down at his plate, his ears turning red. He knew what this meant. I sat perfectly still. I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was a profound, absolute silence. It was the feeling of a machine finally running out of fuel. 6? She could barely feed the 5 she had. She had no partner in the picture. The fathers of the previous children were a mix of distant memories and missed child support payments. She had no job. She lived in a rental house that my parents subsidized, and I paid for the field trips. I paid for the groceries when she was short. I picked them up from school. I soothed the tantrums. They were all looking at me now. The hugging had stopped. The spotlight had shifted. They were waiting for the reliable one to sanction this. They were waiting for me to smile and say, "How wonderful," so they could pretend this wasn't a disaster. "Claire," Tessa said, her smile faltering just a fraction, "aren't you happy?" I looked at her. I looked at her smooth, unlined forehead, protected from stress by the buffer of my labor. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was flat. It had no inflection. My mother rushed to fill the gap. "Oh, she is just surprised." "We all are, but it is such good news. And you know?" She reached out and squeezed Tessa's hand, beaming at the table. "It takes a village, right? And Claire is basically their second mom anyway." The words landed in the center of the table like a grenade that everyone refused to acknowledge. Claire is basically their second mom anyway. It was meant to be a compliment. It was meant to be a badge of honor. But in that moment, I heard it for what it was, a conscription. It was a verbal contract binding me to another 18 years of servitude. It was a statement that my life, my career, my choices, were secondary to the biological imperative of my sister's whims. My father nodded vigorously. "That is right. We all pitch in. Close-knit. That is what we are." Tessa smiled at me. A conspiratorial, sweet smile. "I could not do it without you. Claire, you know that." I looked at the roast beef on my plate. I felt sick. Not the nausea of illness, but the nausea of vertigo. I was standing on a cliff, and they were all cheering for me to jump. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not list the thousands of dollars I had spent this year alone. I just nodded, a small mechanical motion, and inside, something clicked off. The pilot light that had kept me warm and compliant for 33 years simply went out. The drive home was a blur. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets black and shiny. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The silence in the car was loud. Second mom. I thought of Noah's face when he asked for the $20. I thought of the way Mia smelled when she fell asleep on my shoulder. I loved them. God, I loved them. And that was the trap. I felt a wave of guilt so potent it almost doubled me over. How could I be angry about a baby? A baby was innocent. A baby was a life. But then the anger came, hot and sharp, cutting through the guilt. I was angry because they assumed my time was infinite. They assumed my wallet was communal. They assumed that because I had not produced children of my own, my womb and my hands were public property available for the overflow of Tessa's fertility. And then, beneath the anger, the grief, I was 33. I had not dated seriously in 4 years because I was always busy. I had turned down a relocation to Chicago for work because Tessa was going through a rough patch. I had built my life around the negative space of her needs. I was not the main character in my own life. I was the supporting actress who kept the plot moving so the star could have her dramatic arc. I parked the car in my garage, but did not get out. I sat there in the dark, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I cried, but they were not the cathartic tears of a movie heroine. They were the ugly, leaking tears of exhaustion. The next morning, the office of Dr. Naomi Hart felt like the only safe place in the world. It was a small room with a white noise machine and a window overlooking a park. I sat on the beige sofa, clutching a tissue I hadn't used yet. "So, doctor," Hart said gently, "the dinner, how did it go?" I stared at the abstract painting on the wall. It looked like a storm at sea. "She is pregnant again," I said. "Doctor." Hart paused. She did not gasp. She was a professional. "Number 6? "Yes. And how did you react?" "I didn't. I just sat there. I looked at Dr. Hart. Her face was kind, but firm. She had been trying to get me to see the patterns for months. I had resisted. I had defended them. They are family. I would say, they need me. I took a deep breath. The air shuddered in my lungs. My mom said I was basically their second mother. "Doctor." Hart raised an eyebrow. "How did that feel to hear?" I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I think," I said, testing the words, feeling their weight. I think my family needs me to drown quietly so they can call it loyalty. The sentence hung in the air. It was the truest thing I had ever said. Doctor. Hart leaned forward. That is a powerful realization. Claire, if you stop drowning, what happens to them? They have to swim, I whispered, or they sink. And whose responsibility is their swimming? The silence stretched. Theirs. I said, Doctor. Hart nodded. Okay, so, what is one thing, one small, measurable thing, you can do today to stop drowning? I thought about the phone call at 5:15. I thought of the way Mrs. Higgins looked at me. No more surprise pickups. I said, I need 24 hours notice, unless someone is in the hospital or the building is on fire. I need 24 hours. Can you communicate that? Doctor, Hart asked. I left the session feeling a strange mixture of terror and lightness. I had a shield. It was a small shield, made of paper, but it was mine. I walked to my car. I unlocked the door. My phone buzzed. I looked down. Tessa, emergency, please. Can you grab the kids? I am stuck at the DMV, and the line is insane. I promise this is the last time. I stared at the screen. The universe was not subtle. It was testing the structural integrity of the wall I had just decided to build. Emergency, the word that used to make me jump, the word that used to bypass my brain and activate my feet. I looked at the time. It was 4 o'clock. I took a breath. I did not start the car. I looked at the phone, and for the first time in my life, I did not immediately type, on my way. I just stared at it, and the silence in my car felt like the beginning of a war. My thumb hovered over the glass screen of my phone, trembling just enough to blur the pixels. The air in my car felt thick, recycled and stale. Despite the engine being off, I read Tessa's message for the 10th time. Emergency. Please, can you grab the kids? I am stuck at the DMV, and the line is insane. I promise this is the last time. The old Claire, the one who existed until 20 minutes ago inside Dr. Hart's office, would have already been in motion. I would have calculated the route, factored in traffic on Elm Street, and texted back on my way before my brain even registered the inconvenience. I would have absorbed the stress so Tessa didn't have to. But Dr. Hart's question was still ringing in my ears. If you stop drowning, what happens to them? I typed. I deleted. I typed again. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It felt ridiculous to be this terrified of a text message. But it wasn't just a text. It was a structural load-bearing wall I was about to remove with a sledgehammer. I navigated to my contacts, copied the number for the Briar Glen Family Resource Center, and pasted it into the chat window. They had a vetted, emergency sitter service. It wasn't free, but it was safe. I took a breath that rattled in my chest and typed the new script. I cannot pick them up today. I have a commitment I cannot break. Here's the number for the emergency sitter service at the resource center. They have immediate availability. I pressed send. A wave of nausea rolled through me so potent I had to lean my head back against the headrest. I closed my eyes, waiting for the fallout. I felt physically sick, a hot, prickly heat spreading across my skin. It was the withdrawal symptom of a lifelong addiction to being the good girl. The phone buzzed 30 seconds later. What? I stared at the single word. I did not reply. Another buzz. Claire. Seriously? I am at the DMV. I can't leave or I lose my spot. I have been here for 2 hours. Do not be dramatic. Just go get them. My fingers twitched. The urge to explain, to apologize, to soften the blow was overwhelming. I'm sorry. I just can't today because... No. Explanations were entry points for negotiation. I typed, I cannot do it. The service is reliable. You will need to call them or leave the line. The response was immediate, and the tonal shift was sharp enough to give me whiplash. The sweet, pleading sister vanished, replaced by the cornered victim. Wow, okay. I didn't know we were punishing the kids now because you are in a mood. Noah is going to be sitting on the curb wondering why his aunt doesn't care about him. Hope your commitment is worth that. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I could see Noah sitting on the concrete planter outside Maple Way, kicking his heels, looking for my car. The image was vivid and designed to hurt. Tessa knew exactly where my buttons were because she had installed them. But then I remembered the reality. Maple Way Learning Center did not put children on the curb. They had a policy. They had an indoor waiting area. The staff would be annoyed. Yes, they would charge a late fee. Yes, but Noah would be safe. He would be warm. He would be reading a book or playing on a tablet. Tessa wasn't describing reality. She was describing a nightmare scenario to force my hand. She was weaponizing my fear of harming the children to secure my compliance. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. I did not reply. I started the engine, backed out of the parking spot, and drove toward my apartment. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every vibration of the phone made my stomach clench. But I kept driving home. My apartment was quiet when I walked in. Usually, on days like this, it would be filled with the chaotic noise of 5 children, the television blaring cartoons, the thud of socks running down the hallway, the constant demand for snacks. Now, there was just the hum of the refrigerator. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen island. Gripping the cold granite, I had done it. The sky hadn't fallen. Then my phone rang. The screen displayed, "Mom." I let it ring 3 times before answering. I needed to compose my voice, to strip it of the defensive edge that would only make her push harder. "Hi, Mom, Claire." Diane Wood's voice was soft, laced with that specific brand of maternal concern that was actually a reprimand in disguise. Tessa just called me in tears. She had to leave the DMV. She is on her way to get the kids now, but she is very upset. I leaned against the counter. I am sure it was frustrating for her. Frustrating? Claire. She is pregnant. She is overwhelmed. You know how hard she is trying to get things back on track. I closed my eyes. I knew this script. I had memorized my lines for it years ago. I know. Mom, then why? Diane asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if we were discussing a terminal illness. Why didn't you just help her? It would have taken you 30 minutes. She relies on you. We all do. I had to work. I lied. It wasn't a lie in the grand sense. I had to work on myself. But it was the only currency they respected. Diane sighed. I know you have your career, honey, and we are so proud of you. But family comes first. Tessa means well. She really does. This is just a rough patch. It is temporary. Once the baby comes, things will settle down. Temporary. The word hung in the air between us. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. Tessa has been in a rough patch since Noah was born. That was 12 years ago. That is not fair, Diane snapped, the softness evaporating. She is your sister. I love her. I said, but I can't be the backup plan for every day of the week. We are not asking for every day, Diane said, retreating to the vagueness that allowed them to ignore the math. Just when she needs help, it is temporary. Claire, just be patient. I hung up 10 minutes later with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. Temporary. They had used that word when she dropped out of college. They used it when she moved back home the first time. They used it with baby number 2, and 3, and 4. 7 years of temporary crises that had calcified into a permanent lifestyle. The next morning at Arbor Crest Health Network, the air conditioning was blasting, a welcome shock to my system. I walked to my office, keeping my head down, afraid that somehow the drama of the previous evening was visible on my skin like a rash. Claire, do you have a moment? It was Marcus Thorne, the director of operations. He was standing in the doorway of his office, holding a file. Marcus was a man of few words and high expectations. Sure. Marcus. I followed him in. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. We have been reviewing the proposals for the upcoming fiscal year, he said, opening the folder. The board is finally moving forward with the Community Maternal Health Partnership. It is a massive pilot program. We are looking at coordinating care between the hospital, local clinics, and social services to close the gap for at-risk mothers in the county. My pulse quickened. This was the project I had written the initial white paper for 3 years ago. It was the kind of work that actually changed lives, rather than just managing them. "We need a project lead," Marcus said. "Someone who knows the community, knows the stakeholders, and can handle the logistics. I want you to run it." I sat up straighter. "You do?" "Yes. But I need to be clear. Claire, this isn't a 9-to-5 administration role. You will be meeting with the Stonebridge Community Foundation, presenting to the City Council, and managing a team of 6. It requires predictability. If we have a board meeting at 6 on a Tuesday, I need to know you are there, not rushing out for a personal emergency." He looked at me over his glasses. He didn't know the details of my life, but he knew the pattern. He had seen me leave early. He had seen me take calls in the hallway where I sounded apologetic and frantic. "I can do it," I said. The words came out before I could doubt them. Marcus nodded slowly. "It is a leadership track position. Claire, it comes with a significant title change and a salary adjustment, but the commitment has to be absolute. Can you give me that?" I thought of Tessa at the DMV. I thought of the temporary chaos. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can—" "Good. We will announce it next week." I walked out of his office feeling like I was floating. This was it. This was the exit ramp. This was the thing that would force me to build walls, because I literally could not afford to leave them down. I met Lena Park for lunch in the cafeteria. Lena was the head of billing, a woman who dealt in hard numbers and had zero tolerance for ambiguity. She was also the only person at work who knew the extent of my family situation, mostly because she had caught me crying in the break room 3 years ago. I told her about the promotion. I told her about the boundary I had set the day before. "So, you actually said no?" Lena asked, stabbing a cherry tomato with her fork. "I did. And then my mom called and told me I was breaking the family code." Lena chewed thoughtfully. "You know what your problem is. Claire, I have a feeling you are about to tell me. You never make your no inconvenient for them. You make it inconvenient for you." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means that even when you help them, you do it in a way that hurts you. So they never feel the cost. You absorb the cost. And when you say no, you do it with so much apology and guilt that they know they can wear you down. You are a vending machine that sometimes gets stuck. They just have to shake you a little harder to get the candy bar." I put my sandwich down. The image was uncomfortably accurate. "I am trying to stop." I said, "Good," Lena said. "Because this new job? If you try to play super aunt and project lead at the same time, you will fail at one of them, and I am betting it won't be the aunt part, because you are terrified of your sister. I am not terrified of her." Lena raised an eyebrow. "You are terrified of her disapproval." "Same thing." She took a sip of her iced tea. "Start writing it down." "Claire, writing what down?" "Everything. Every time they ask you for something, every dollar you spend, every hour you miss work. Put it in a spreadsheet. Why? Because right now, you are operating on feelings, and your feelings are telling you that you are mean and selfish. You need data. Data doesn't have feelings. Data just tells you the truth." That night, I opened my laptop. I created a new spreadsheet. I titled it simply, "The Cost." I started with the last month, going through my calendar and my text messages. October 12th, pick up from school, 2 hours. October 14th, grocery run for Tessa, $150. October 15th, late for work, due to dropping off forgotten gym bag, 45 minutes. October 18th, field trip money, $20. October 20th, Tessa's car repair bill, $400. I typed and typed. The list grew. I went back 2 months, then 3. It was nauseating. When I looked at the individual instances, they seemed manageable. A 20 here, a ride there. But when I looked at the columns, the aggregate weight of it crushed me. I had spent over $3,000 in 4 months on things that were not my responsibility. I had logged nearly 40 hours of time, a full work week, doing unpaid labor for a household that I did not live in. I was not just a sister. I was a secondary income stream. I was a part-time employee. I decided to check my bank statements to ensure I hadn't missed any Venmo transfers or direct payments. I logged into my account at Ridgefield Community Credit Union. I scrolled through the lines of transactions: gas station, grocery store, electric bill, mortgage. Then I saw it: Brightness Supplies, recurring, $29.99. I frowned. Brightnest? I didn't have a baby. I didn't have a subscription for diapers or wipes. I scrolled back to the previous month. There it was again: Brightness Supplies, $29.99. I went back 6 months. It was there every single month. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I clicked on the transaction details. It was a subscription service for premium baby products. I pulled out my phone. I needed to know. I couldn't sleep not knowing. I texted Tessa. "Hey, weird question. Do you use Brightnest for the baby stuff?" She replied 10 minutes later. "Yeah, they are great. Why? You getting me a gift card?" LOL. I stared at the screen. No, I noticed a charge on my bank statement for them. It has been coming out every month. The ellipsis bubbled for a long time, then stopped, then bubbled again. Oh, that. OMG, I totally forgot about that. I waited. When I was at your place a while ago, I think I used your iPad to order some wipes because my phone died. It must have saved your card or something. I thought I switched it back to mine. That is so weird. My stomach dropped. She had used my iPad. She had used my saved autofill data, and she had forgotten to switch it back for 6 months. Tessa, I typed. My fingers feeling heavy. That is almost $200 over 6 months. Her reply was instant and defensive. Okay, relax. It was a mix-up. I didn't do it on purpose. It's just wipes. Claire, I will pay you back when I get my tax return. Don't have a heart attack over $30. It wasn't the money, it was the $30. She broke it down to the single unit to make me look petty. Ignoring the cumulative total, she minimized it. She laughed it off. It's just wipes. But it wasn't just wipes. It was my money, taken without my permission. And when caught, she didn't apologize. She attacked me for noticing. I realized then that to Tessa, my money was not private property. It was a reservoir that she had a natural right to tap into because she had needs and I had surplus. The lies weren't malicious crimes to her. They were just the path of least resistance. I didn't reply. The next morning, I took an early lunch break and drove to the Ridgefield Community Credit Union branch on Main Street. The building was old, built of red brick, with the kind of heavy glass doors that signaled security. I sat across from a personal banker named Mr. Henderson. He was young, wearing a tie that was too wide for his frame. "I have some unauthorized charges," I said, sliding the printed statement across the desk. He frowned, tapping on his keyboard. "Let's take a look. Brightness Supplies?" "Yes," he hummed. "It looks like this was set up as a recurring subscription using the card ending in 4582. The IP address for the transaction initiation." He turned the screen slightly. "It matches the frequent login location for your mobile banking app. Your home IP?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It was done on my iPad." "Mr." Henderson looked at me. His expression softened. He saw the name on the account. He saw the hesitation. He knew this wasn't a Russian hacker. If it was a family member, he said carefully. "It can be tricky, technically, if you gave them access to the device." I didn't give access to the card. I said, "But I don't want to file a fraud report. I don't want to involve the police." I understood. I couldn't send the police to my pregnant sister's door over $200. That would be the nuclear option that would destroy the family forever. "I just want to stop it," I said. "I want to make sure it can never happen again." "Okay, Mr. Henderson said. "Here's what we do. We close this debit card immediately. I will issue you a new one. I can also help you reset your online banking credentials and remove any saved payment methods from your digital wallets if you have your device. And," I hesitated, "I want to open a new checking account, a completely separate one, and I want to transfer the bulk of my savings there." He nodded. "Smart. We can set it up so that your primary checking is the new one, and the old one, the one your family might know the routing number for, is kept with a minimum balance. Do it, I said. I spent the next hour signing papers. I changed my passwords to complex strings of characters that had no relation to my birthday or my dog's name. I removed my credit card from my iPad. I wiped the autofill data. When I walked out of the bank, the sun was shining, but I felt a profound sense of mourning. I had protected myself. I had drawn a hard, legal line around my resources. I had secured my perimeter. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. I realized I was grieving the sister I wanted to have, the one who would never steal from me, the one who would respect me. I was grieving the illusion of trust. I had just locked the doors to my life, and the only people I was locking out were the ones who were supposed to love me the most. I sat in my car and looked at the new blue debit card in my hand. It had a different number, a number Tessa didn't know. I put it in my wallet, behind my driver's license, then my phone buzzed. Tessa. Hey, my Bright Nest order just got declined. Did you cancel the card or something? I really need those wipes. Claire. I stared at the message. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't embarrassed that she had been caught. She was annoyed that the tap had run dry. I didn't reply. I started the car and drove back to work. I had a maternal health partnership to lead, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for being the one in charge. The produce section of the Briar Glen Market was usually my place of refuge. It was cold, bright, and organized by color. There was something soothing about the geometry of stacked apples and the mist that sprayed over the kale every 10 minutes. I was standing in front of the bell peppers, debating between red and yellow for a stir-fry I would likely eat alone, when Mrs. Gable maneuvered her cart next to mine. Mrs. Gable was a fixture in Briar Glen. She had taught 3rd grade for 40 years and now spent her retirement patrolling the town's moral perimeter, mostly through Facebook comments and grocery store ambushes. Claire, she beamed, her voice cutting through the hum of the refrigeration units. I just saw the post. It is just so wonderful what you are doing. I froze, a red pepper halfway to a plastic bag. I smiled, the muscle memory kicking in before my brain could catch up. Oh, hello, Mrs. Gable. What post? She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, you are too modest. Tessa's post on the bulletin, about the new baby, and how you have stepped up to be the rock of the family. It brought a tear to my eye. Honestly, a sister's love is the foundation of a home. Isn't that just beautiful? My stomach turned over, a slow, heavy rotation. Tessa posted on the Briar Glen Bulletin? The bulletin was not just a forum. It was the town square, the jury box, and the gossip column all rolled into one. It was where people reported lost dogs, recommended plumbers, and passively aggressively shamed neighbors for not mowing their lawns. Yes, honey, hundreds of likes already. It is just so nice to see young people sticking together. Most families these days just drift apart. But not the Woods. You are a saint. Claire. Truly. She patted my arm, her hand dry and papery, and wheeled her cart toward the dairy aisle, leaving me standing there with the red pepper and a sudden feeling of claustrophobia. I abandoned my cart, I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled up the Briar Glen Bulletin on my phone. It was the top post. There was a photo from 3 years ago, a selfie Tessa had taken of us at Christmas. In the photo, I was holding baby Mia, looking tired but smiling, while Tessa leaned on my shoulder, looking radiant. The caption read, "So incredibly blessed to announce that baby number 6 is on the way." I know people say it takes a village, but I am so lucky that my village is my amazing family, especially my sister Claire Wood, who has been there for every step, every crisis, and every joy. She is basically a second mom to my kids, and I honestly don't know where we would be without her generosity and constant support. God is good. Blessed Sisters family. First, I stared at the screen. The likes were climbing. The comments were a cascade of heart emojis and praise. Claire is the best. Such a good aunt. We need more people like Claire in the world. I felt a rush of heat up my neck that had nothing to do with the temperature. This was not a tribute. This was a trap. Tessa knew I had pulled away. She knew I had set a boundary with the pickup. She knew I had cut off the credit card. So she had taken the narrative public. She had painted a portrait of me as the second mom, the constant support, and pinned it to the community bulletin board. If I stopped helping now, I wouldn't just be a sister saying no. I would be a hypocrite. I would be the woman who accepted the praise and then abandoned the pregnant mother. She had weaponized my reputation to ensure my compliance. I put the phone down. I did not like the post. I did not comment. I drove home in silence, the word saint echoing in my head like a curse. 2 days later, I sat in a booth at the Hawthorne Cafe, waiting for my parents. I had called the meeting. I had requested a neutral location because the family home was too full of ghosts and unspoken rules. Here, surrounded by the smell of roasted beans and the noise of the espresso machine, I hoped we could have a conversation that relied on logic rather than guilt. I had prepared a list. It was a mental list, but it was structured. I was willing to offer scheduled help, 2 Saturdays a month. I was willing to help research government assistance programs. I was willing to be an aunt. I was not willing to be a co-parent. My parents arrived 10 minutes late. Gerald, my father, looked annoyed, shrugging out of his rain jacket with a heavy sigh. Diane, my mother, looked anxious, her eyes darting around the cafe as if checking for snipers. They sat down. I had already ordered coffee for them. Black for Dad. Latte with skim milk for Mom. It was a reflex I couldn't suppress. Thanks. Claire, Dad said, taking a sip. So, why the summit meeting? Everything okay at work? Work is fine. Dad. Actually, work is great. Then what is it? Diane asked, unwrapping the paper from her straw with trembling fingers. Is it about Tessa? She said you were acting strange about the pickup the other day. I took a deep breath. I clasped my hands on the table to keep them from fidgeting. It is about the dynamic, I said. I saw Tessa's post on the bulletin. Diane brightened. Oh, wasn't that sweet? She is so proud of you. Claire, she really loves you. She tagged me to lock me in. Mom. Diane's smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean that I cannot be the second parent anymore. I love the kids. You know I do. But I have a full-time job. I have a life I'm trying to build. I cannot be on call for emergencies that happen because of poor planning. I cannot be the financial safety net. I paused, waiting for them to nod, to understand. Instead, Gerald set his cup down with a clatter. So what are you saying? You are quitting? Like it is a job? It has become a job. Dad, an unpaid one that I never applied for. Gerald narrowed his eyes. This is family. Claire, we don't have job descriptions. We pitch in. That is what we do. Your sister is in a bind. She is alone. She is bringing another life into the world. She is 35. Dad. She has 5 children. This isn't a bind. This is a lifestyle. Diane reached across the table, her eyes filling with tears. The tears were instant, a waterworks display that I had seen 1,000 times. Whenever the logic got too hard, the emotions got too wet. Claire, how can you be so cold? She sobbed softly. You were always such a good big sister. Even when you were little, you were always so mature. You used to watch her when I had to run errands. You were 5 years old and you would hold her hand so tight. I looked at my mother, and for the first time, the nostalgia didn't work. I didn't feel a warm glow about my maturity. I felt a chill. I was 5. Mom, I said quietly, I shouldn't have been responsible for her then, and I shouldn't be responsible for her now. You praised me for being a little adult because it made your life easier, and you are doing it again. Diane recoiled as if I had slapped her. Gerald leaned forward, his face reddening. Watch your tone with your mother. I am not being disrespectful. Dad, I am being honest. I am drowning, and instead of throwing me a rope, you guys are handing me rocks and telling me they are medals. Gerald scoffed. Drowning. You have a nice apartment. You drive a new car. You have a fancy job. Your sister is the one drowning. And if you loved her, If you really loved her, you would just make it work. The sentence hung in the air, suspended in the scent of coffee and entitlement. If you loved your sister, you'd just make it work. It was the thesis statement of the Wood family. Love was not connection. Love was capacity. Love was measured by how much inconvenience you could swallow without choking. I looked at Gerald. I looked at Diane, who was wiping her eyes with a napkin, peeking over the edge to see if I was breaking. And then, it happened. The shift. It was a physical sensation, like a gear slipping into a new groove in my brain. The anger didn't vanish, but it cooled. It crystallized. I stopped trying to convince them. I stopped trying to make them see my perspective, because I realized they saw it perfectly well. They just didn't care. They didn't want a solution. They didn't want Tessa to become independent, because that would require them to stop enabling her, and that would be hard work. They wanted the old arrangement. They wanted me to be the shock absorber so the bumps in the road didn't spill their coffee. I sat back in the booth. My heartbeat slowed. I understand that is how you feel, I said. My voice was calm. It lacked the desperate pitch of a daughter seeking approval. Diane looked up, confused by the tonal shift. So, you will help her? I will help on my terms. Mom, I will take the kids 2 Saturdays a month. I will help you research childcare subsidies. But I will not be the emergency contact. I will not pay for her groceries. And I will not drop my work to fix her schedule. Gerald stood up. He threw a $10 bill on the table. I don't know who you think you are lately, Claire, but you are breaking your mother's heart. I looked at the money on the table. I am trying to save my own life. Dad, he sneered. Selfish. That is what it is. Just selfish. He walked out. Diane lingered for a moment, looking at me with a tragic expression that was half genuine, half performance, before hurrying after him. I sat alone in the booth. I finished my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted like clarity. The office of Marissa Keene, family law attorney, was nothing like the Hawthorne Cafe. It was sleek, modern, and quiet. There were no emotional manipulations here, only statutes and precedents. I had found Marissa through a recommendation from a colleague at Arbor Crest. I wasn't suing anyone. I wasn't fighting for custody. I just needed to know the rules of the game I had been playing blindfolded. Marissa was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper bob cut. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished explaining the years of pickups, the financial support, the second mom comments, and the recent bulletin post, she capped her pen. You are in a precarious position. Claire, she said. I frowned. How? I have no legal rights to the kids. I am just the aunt. Marissa leaned back. The law looks at biology, yes, but it also looks at established patterns. We call it de facto parenting, or in loco parentis. If you have been the primary source of stability, financial support, and routine care for a significant period, you create an expectation of reliance. She tapped the pad. If something were to happen, say, Child Protective Services got involved because Tessa left them alone, or there was a custody dispute with one of the fathers, you could be pulled in, not as a helper, but as a party. Or conversely, if you suddenly stop everything cold turkey and the children suffer because Tessa can't function, there is a non-zero risk of you being accused of negligence if you had established yourself as a guardian figure. I felt the blood drain from my face. I thought I was just being nice. Marissa nodded. Nice is a slippery slope in family court. But here's the bigger risk. Expectations. Schools, doctors, creditors. If you are listed as the emergency contact, if you are the one signing permission slips, you are signaling to the world that you are liable. What do I do? I asked. The panic was rising again. You formalize the boundary. Marissa said. You remove your name from the school records. You stop signing things. You stop paying directly. If you want to help financially, you pay the vendor. Or better yet, you set up a trust they can't touch. But you need to stop acting like a co-parent if you don't want the liability of a co-parent. She looked me in the eye. And you need to be prepared. When you remove the prop, the structure will wobble. They will blame you for the wobble. But you didn't build the faulty structure. You just held it up. I left her office with a headache, but it was a different kind of headache than the one I got from my parents. This was the headache of reality. The letter to Mapleway Learning Center was difficult to write. I drafted it 3 times. It had to be professional, polite, and absolute. Dear Director Stevens, please remove my name, Claire Wood, from the emergency contact list and the authorized pickup list for the children of Tessa Wood. Effective immediately. I will no longer be available for transport or emergency care decisions. Please direct all inquiries to their mother, Tessa Wood, or their grandparents, Gerald and Diane Wood. Sincerely, Claire Wood. I printed it, I signed it, I drove to Mapleway on my lunch break. I didn't go when the kids were there. I went at 1 o'clock, during nap time. Mrs. Higgins was at the desk. She looked surprised to see me in the middle of the day. Claire, is everything okay? I handed her the envelope. Everything is fine, Mrs. Higgins. I just need to update my file. Or rather, remove it. She opened the letter. She read it. Her eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. Oh, I see. She looked at me, and for the first time, the pity was gone, replaced by something else. Respect? Or maybe just shock. We will update the system, she said. Does Tessa know? She knows I'm stepping back. I said, this just formalizes it. I walked out of the building. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. It felt like I had just cut a wire on a bomb. I didn't know if I had disarmed it or triggered the timer. The explosion came 2 days later, on a Friday evening. I was in my apartment, reviewing the budget for the maternal health partnership. The silence of my home was usually my favorite thing, but tonight it felt heavy, charged with the static electricity of the waiting game. Then came the knock. It wasn't a normal knock. It was a frantic, rhythmic pounding. I checked the peephole. It was Tessa. She was wearing a trench coat. Beside her stood a large, rolling suitcase. I opened the door. Tessa? She pushed past me, pulling the suitcase. She didn't look at me. She marched into the center of the living room and spun around. Her face was blotchy, her mascara smeared in a way that looked artfully tragic. I can't do it. Claire, I just can't. She threw her hands up. The coat fell open. She was wearing pajamas underneath. Can't do what? Where are the kids? They are with Mom and Dad. She wailed. I told them I was having a breakdown. I am having a total breakdown. And it is your fault. She pointed a finger at me. Her nail polish chipped. You humiliated me. The school called me today. They said they couldn't reach me because my phone was off. And when they tried to call you, they saw a note that said, "Do not contact." Do not contact? Who does that to their own nieces and nephews? I stayed by the door. I didn't move toward her. I didn't offer a hug. I did. I said calmly, I told you. Tessa, I am not the backup anymore. She kicked the suitcase. It spun around easily. Too easily. It didn't wobble with weight. It skittered across the floor like an empty cardboard box. I noticed the lightness of it. If she was really moving in, if she was really leaving her life, that bag would be packed with clothes, shoes, toiletries. It would be heavy. This was a prop. This was theater. I can't stay at that house, she screamed. The noise is too much. The stress. I need peace. Claire, I need to stay here. Just for a few weeks. Until the baby comes. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. The shift from accuser to refugee was instantaneous. I need my big sister. Please. It was the ultimate test. She was standing in my living room, claiming distress, asking for sanctuary. The old Claire would have caved. The old Claire would have made up the guest bed and ordered a pizza and listened to her complain about how unfair the world was. But I looked at the empty suitcase. I looked at the pajamas worn under the trench coat, a costume designed for sympathy. I can't let you stay here. Tessa, I said. Her mouth dropped open. What? I said no. You cannot live here. But I have nowhere to go. You have a house. Tessa, you have our parents, who have the kids right now. You are not homeless. I am emotionally homeless, she shouted. That sounds like something she read on Instagram. I walked over to the kitchen counter. I picked up a notepad. I wrote down a number. If you are having a breakdown, I said, keeping my voice level, then you need professional support. This is the number for the crisis hotline at the Family Resource Center. They can connect you with a counselor. They can help you find a support group for overwhelmed mothers. I tore the page off and held it out to her. She stared at the paper as if it were infected. I don't need a hotline, Claire. I need you. No, I said, you need a rescue. And you want me because my rescue doesn't require you to change anything. If you call that number, they will ask you to make a plan. They will ask you to take responsibility. You don't want that. Tessa's face hardened. The tragedy mask slipped, revealing the cold, sharp anger beneath. She slapped the paper out of my hand. You think you are so much better than me. Don't you? She hissed. Miss Perfect Job, Miss Clean Apartment, you sit here and judge me, but you have no idea what it is like. You are barren and cold and selfish. The words were meant to draw blood. Barren. I didn't flinch. I am not barren. Tessa, I am just busy raising your children, or I was. She grabbed the handle of the suitcase. She yanked it upright. It practically flew into the air, confirming its emptiness. You will regret this, she said. You are going to end up all alone in this sterile box. And nobody is going to care. She stormed to the door. She paused, waiting for me to call her back, waiting for the last-minute reprieve. Good night. Tessa, I said. She slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I stood in the silence. I looked at the piece of paper on the floor with the hotline number. I picked it up and placed it on the counter. I was shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of exertion. I had just held a door shut against a hurricane. I went to the window and watched her walk to her car. She threw the suitcase into the trunk with one hand. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. She drove away. I turned off the lights in the living room. I was alone, and for the first time, the aloneness didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to become something other than a sister. But I knew this wasn't the end. Tessa had retreated, but she hadn't surrendered. She would regroup. She would find a new angle, and with the Stonebridge presentation coming up, I had a sinking feeling that the next battleground wouldn't be my living room. It would be my career. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I started typing, not a spreadsheet this time, a timeline. Incident 1. Unauthorized credit card use. Incident 2. The Briar Glen Bulletin Post. Incident 3. The staged crisis. Marissa Keene had told me to be prepared. I was going to be prepared. If they wanted to make my life a public spectacle, I would make sure I had the script ready to defend it. I saved the file as documentation_personal. Then I went to bed, and I slept through the night. The conference room at Arbor Crest Health Network had a view that justified the rent. From the 12th floor, Briar Glen looked like a model train set. Neat, organized, and manageable. It was a stark contrast to the ground-level reality of my life, which felt like a train derailment happening in slow motion. Marcus Thorne stood at the head of the mahogany table, tapping a laser pointer against a projection screen. The Stonebridge Community Foundation controls the largest philanthropic endowment in the county, Marcus said, his voice carrying the gravity of 7 figures. They are looking to fund one major initiative this year. Just one. And they are leaning toward our maternal health partnership because it addresses systemic gaps. He turned to me. Claire, you are the face of this. You wrote the proposal. You know the data better than anyone. When we present to their board next month, I want you leading the charge. I felt a flush of pride, warm and steady. This was my domain. Here, my competence was currency. Here, when I solved a problem, people thanked me and deposited a paycheck into my account. They didn't ask me to solve it again 5 minutes later for free. I am ready. Marcus, I said, I have the impact studies from the pilot phase. The numbers are undeniable. It is not just about numbers, Marcus said, clicking the slide to a photo of the Stonebridge board members, a group of serious-looking men and women in blazers. It is about trust. Stonebridge is old money, conservative, They care about reputation, stability, and character. They are investing in the leader as much as the program. I nodded, keeping my expression professional, while a small shard of ice formed in my stomach. Reputation, stability. My professional life was soaring, but my personal life was currently a demolition zone. If Stonebridge looked too closely at the leader, what would they see? A woman whose sister was posting vague, passive-aggressive prayers on community forums? A woman who had recently been accused of causing her pregnant sister's nervous breakdown? "I need you bulletproof." "Claire," Marcus added. "No distractions." I smiled. "I am focused." "Marcus, you do not have to worry." I walked back to my office feeling the weight of the promise I had just made. I was building a firewall between Claire the professional and Claire the daughter. But the heat from the burning bridge of my family was starting to radiate through the partition. The attacks began softly, like a gas leak, odorless at first, then suffocating. It started with a phone call from my cousin, Bethany. Bethany lived 2 towns over and usually only called when she was selling candle subscriptions. "Hey, Claire," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I just wanted to check on you. I am fine." "Bethany." "Why?" "Oh, you know, Tessa called me yesterday. She sounded so worried. She said you have been off? Yeah. She said you are under a lot of pressure at work, and it is making you paranoid. She mentioned you are seeing a new therapist who is really aggressive. Something about repressed memory syndrome or isolating you from your support system." I gripped the phone. The narrative was being rewritten. My boundaries weren't choices. They were symptoms. My refusal to be exploited wasn't strength. It was sickness. "I am seeing a therapist," I said, keeping my voice even. "She is helping me set healthy limits. I am not paranoid. Bethany, I am just busy." Bethany hummed, a sound that indicated she didn't believe me. "Well, you know how cult-like those doctors can get. Tessa just wants to make sure you aren't being controlled. She loves you so much." "Claire." She was crying about how much she misses the old you, the old me, the one who paid the bills, the one who had no self. "Tell Tessa I am fine," I said, "and tell her if she is worried. She can call me directly." "She won't," Bethany said. "She is afraid of upsetting you. She thinks you are fragile right now." I hung up. Fragile. It was brilliant, in a twisted way. By framing me as unstable, Tessa inoculated herself against any criticism I might level at her. If I revealed she stole money? Oh, that is just Claire's paranoia. If I said she was negligent? Claire is projecting her own breakdown. I went to my computer and opened the document I had named The Cost. I added a new tab. The Smear. October 24th. Cousin Bethany calls. Narrative. Claire is mentally unstable/controlled by therapist. I typed it out. Seeing it in black and white stripped the emotion away. It wasn't a family squabble. It was a public relations campaign. The escalation arrived 3 days later. On a Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee, preparing for a site visit to a prenatal clinic, when my email chimed. The sender was my father, Gerald Wood. Subject, FW. Concerned. There was no message from him in the body, just the forwarded text. I clicked it open. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Wood, I am writing to you as a concerned party regarding the recent behavioral changes in your daughter. Claire, while I cannot disclose my professional affiliation due to confidentiality, I feel a moral obligation to reach out. It has come to my attention that Claire is exhibiting classic signs of narcissistic withdrawal and induced dissociative hostility. This often occurs when an individual is under the influence of a radicalized counseling methodology that encourages the severance of primary familial bonds to create dependency on the provider. The sudden cessation of caregiving duties, the financial hoarding, and the cold effect are not signs of independence. They are symptoms of a break. I urge you to intervene before the isolation becomes permanent. Sincerely, a concerned professional. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. My father had forwarded this to me without a single word of defense. He hadn't replied to the sender asking who they were. He hadn't called me to say, "This is garbage." He had sent it to me as an accusation. "Look what people are saying. Look what you have become." I read the email again. Induced dissociative hostility, financial hoarding. The language was clinical, but it felt off. It felt like someone wearing a doctor's coat they bought at a costume shop. Financial hoarding wasn't a clinical diagnosis. It was a grievance. It was exactly what Tessa would call my new bank account. I highlighted the phrase radicalized counseling methodology that encourages the severance of primary familial bonds. I opened a search engine. I pasted the phrase in. The first result was a blog titled, "The Father's Rights Playbook: How to Win Your Custody Battle." I clicked the link. It was a site filled with aggressive legal advice for contentious divorces. I scrolled down to a forum post titled, "Template Letters to Discredit a Hostile Ex." There it was. If the opposing party is seeing a therapist, use this template to cast doubt on their mental state to family and evaluators. Suggest they are being brainwashed. Use terms like narcissistic withdrawal. The email sent to my parents was a copy-paste job. Someone had taken a template designed to destroy a mother in a custody battle and repurposed it to destroy a sister who wouldn't babysit. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This wasn't just Tessa venting. This was calculated. This was an attempt to diagnose me into submission. I picked up my phone and called Marissa Keene. Marissa listened to me read the email. I could hear her typing in the background. "Do not reply." She said, her voice was sharp. "Do not reply to your father. Do not reply to the sender." "But it is fake," I said. I found the blog post. Marissa. "They plagiarized a hate site to gaslight my parents." "I know," Marissa said, "and that is exactly why you don't engage. If you reply with anger, you prove the hostility. If you reply with defense, you prove the paranoia. This is a trap, Claire. They want you to explode so they can point at the explosion and say, 'See? We told you.' So I just let my parents think I'm crazy?" "Your parents already think what they want to think," she said. "This email just gives them a vocabulary for it." She paused. "I want you to look at the headers of that email. Can you do that?" "I think so. Forward it to me. I have an investigator who can trace the originating IP. It says, 'A concerned professional,' but it came from somewhere." I forwarded the email. "What do I do in the meantime?" I asked. "You work." Marissa said, "You focus on that Stonebridge presentation. You build your reputation where it matters, in the real world, with people who require facts, not feelings. And Claire, yes, lock down your social media. If you have any, make everything private. If they are using custody tactics, the next step is usually digging for dirt to spin out of context." I hung up. I didn't have much social media, just a LinkedIn profile and an Instagram account I used to follow bakeries. But I made them private. I sat at my desk and forced myself to open the spreadsheet for the maternal health partnership. I looked at the budget lines. I looked at the outcome projections, financial hoarding. I looked at the savings account I had opened at the credit union. It had $4,000 in it, money that would have gone to Tessa's car, or Tessa's groceries, or Tessa's bail. I wasn't hoarding. I was surviving. The answer came back 24 hours later. I was at home, eating a salad I couldn't taste. When Marissa called, we traced it. She said, "Who was it?" I asked. I expected Tessa. I was ready for it to be Tessa. It wasn't Tessa. Marissa said, "The email originated from a Gmail account created 2 days ago, but the recovery email linked to it? It belongs to a Dylan Rourke." I froze. "Dylan? Tessa's boyfriend?" Marissa asked. "Yes." I put the fork down. Dylan Rourke. He was the nice one. He was the one who always sat quietly at family dinners, nodding along, avoiding conflict. He was the one who worked sporadic jobs in construction and always talked about bad luck. I had never had a problem with Dylan. I thought he was just kind of there, a passive accessory to Tessa's chaos. He has been very active on those forums. Marissa said, "My investigator found a user profile with the handle drourke88 asking for advice on dealing with a controlling sister-in-law who controls the family trust." There is no family trust. I whispered, he thinks there is. Marissa said, or he thinks your income is the trust. Claire, this man isn't just a bystander. He is the strategist. Tessa is the emotional engine, but he is steering the car. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Dylan, the quiet guy who always thanked me for the pizza, he was pushing for family unity because unity meant access to my wallet. He was nudging Tessa to demand more because he benefited from the surplus. Does Tessa know? I asked. That is the question. Marissa said, either they are in it together, or he is manipulating her to manipulate you. I need to talk to him. I said, no. Marissa said, you need to stay away from him. I need to know. Marissa, if I'm going to cut them off, I need to know who is holding the knife. I will be careful, I added. Public place. No drama. Just be careful. Claire, men who feel entitled to women's money don't like it when the bank closes. I texted Dylan. Hey, Dylan, I have some stuff for the kids that I need to drop off. Can you meet me at the library? I don't want to come to the house and upset Tessa. It was a lie, but it was a bait he would take. Stuff for the kids usually meant gifts or supplies. He replied in 3 minutes. Sure thing. Claire, thanks for thinking of them. Tessa is having a rough week. Meet you in the lobby at 6? The Briar Glen Public Library was a sanctuary of neutral ground. It was quiet, filled with witnesses, and smelled of old paper. I arrived at 5:50 and sat on a bench near the reference desk. Dylan walked in at 6 sharp. He was wearing work boots and a flannel shirt, looking every inch the hard-working, down-on-his-luck father figure. He had a kind face. That was his weapon. Hey, Claire, he said, smiling warily. He looked around for a bag. Where's the stuff? I didn't bring anything. Dylan? His smile faltered. Oh, I thought you said, I need to talk to you. Sit down. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bench, keeping a foot of distance between us. Is this about the pickup thing? He asked, his voice low. Look, Tessa was really hurt by that. She just feels like you abandoned her. I ignored his opening. I got an email yesterday. Dylan, from a concerned professional. He didn't flinch. His face remained perfectly open, perfectly confused. A what? A professional who thinks I have narcissistic withdrawal. It was a very well-written email, very specific. He shrugged. Weird. People are crazy. Why are you telling me? Because the email was traced to your account. The silence that followed was heavy. A librarian walked past pushing a cart of books, the squeaky wheel the only sound in the world. Dylan's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. They went flat. The nice guy veneer evaporated, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. I don't know what you're talking about. He said, Stop it. I said, I know about the blog. I know about the template. I know you think I am controlling a family trust. He let out a short, sharp laugh. It was an ugly sound. Well, aren't you? No. I said, I am working a job. My money. His jaw tightened. You have so much. Claire, you have the nice car, the apartment, the clothes, and your sister, your own flesh and blood, is scraping by. She is pregnant, and you are just sitting on it. Sitting on what? I asked. My salary? We know you move the money, he said. The words slipped out before he could catch them. I stared at him. What did you say? He realized his mistake. He tried to backtrack, but it was too late. I mean, we know you are. You know? No, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You said you know I moved the money. I had changed banks 5 days ago. I had told no one except the banker. How do you know that? Dylan? He looked away. He rubbed the back of his neck. Tessa still has your login. He mumbled, on the old phone. The app didn't log out. My stomach dropped. I had changed the password, but some apps had a Remember Me feature that bypassed the login for quick views of the balance. I hadn't deauthorized the device explicitly. So you have been watching, I said. We are just worried. He hissed. You drained the main account. Claire, $4,000 just gone. We thought you were in trouble. Or gambling. That is why I sent the email. We thought you were having a breakdown and spending it all. You didn't think I was having a breakdown. I said, you thought I was hiding the loot. It is family money, he said, his voice rising enough that the librarian shushed him. You don't have kids. You don't have expenses. Why do you need to hide it from her? I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. It is not family money. Dylan, it is mine. I earned it. And the fact that you think you are entitled to audit my bank account is exactly why I moved it. I looked down at him. He looked small now, not a concerned father, just a man angry that his meal ticket had been canceled. Tessa doesn't know you sent the email. Does she? I asked. He didn't answer. She doesn't know you are trying to get me committed so you can get power of attorney. I said, that is the next step in the playbook, isn't it? Prove I am incompetent so the family can manage my assets? He stood up, towering over me. You are paranoid. Claire, just like the email said, I stepped back. Creating space. Here are the new rules. Dylan, tell Tessa, I will communicate via a group text only. You, me, Mom, and Dad. No private calls, no side texts, and I will not respond to any emergency unless it is verified by a school official or a doctor. And if you ever access my banking information again, I won't call a therapist. I will call the police. That is hacking, and I will press charges. He glared at me, his face red. You are going to regret this. You are going to be all alone. I am already alone. I said, I have been alone in this family for years. I turned and walked out of the library. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. Then I drove to the nearest phone store and had them wipe my device and issue a new SIM card, just in case. The next week was a blur of work and reconstruction. I threw myself into the Stonebridge presentation. I met with Lena Park every day at lunch. I told her everything. The email, Dylan, the library. He is a predator, Lena said, stabbing her salad. A garden-variety financial predator. He found a chaotic host, your sister, and he is feeding off the ecosystem. You were the main food source. It made sense. Tessa was chaotic, but she wasn't malicious. Dylan was the one who added the malice. He weaponized her need. I need a new ecosystem. I said, so build one, Lena said. I started that afternoon. I volunteered for the Tuesday evening shift at the Briar Glen Family Resource Center, the same place I'd referred Tessa to. I wasn't counseling. I was stocking the food pantry. It was repetitive, manual labor. I lifted boxes of canned peas. I sorted bags of rice. There was a woman there named Sarah, a retired nurse. She saw me struggling with a heavy box, grabbed the other end. Honey, she said, we lifted it together. Thanks, I said. That is what we do, she said. Many hands. I worked there for 3 hours. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody asked me to fix their life. We just worked, side by side. And when we were done, we shared a bag of pretzels. I met a neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, in the hallway of my apartment building. I usually rushed past her. This time, I stopped. Hi, Mrs. Kowalski. How are your roses? She beamed. Oh, they are struggling with the aphids, dear, but the hydrangeas are lovely. She talked for 20 minutes about gardening. I listened. It was a normal, reciprocal human interaction. It felt like drinking water after a week in the desert. I was building a raft, plank by plank. Colleagues, neighbors, volunteers, people who liked me for me, not for what I could provide. Then came the gut punch. It was Friday night. I was feeling strong. I had ignored 3 texts from my mother asking why I was being stubborn. My phone rang. The caller ID said, the Woodhouse. That meant my parents' landline. I hesitated. If I didn't answer, it might be a real emergency. I picked up. Hello? Auntie Claire? It was Sarah, my 10-year-old niece. Her voice was small and sounded wet, like she had been crying. Sarah? Honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? The protective instinct surged. Instant and overwhelming. I was gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. Why won't you come over? she asked. I have been busy with work. Sweetie, Mom says you don't love us anymore. The world stopped. The air left the room. What? I whispered. She says you got a big promotion and you think you are too good for us now. She says you don't love us because we are messy. She sniffled. I am sorry I lost my gym bag. Aunt Claire, I promise I will be better. Please come back. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and fast. This was the nuclear option. Tessa and Dylan had realized they couldn't bully me, so they were using the children as ammunition. They were telling a 10-year-old girl that her aunt's absence was a punishment for her behavior. They were inflicting trauma on their own child just to hurt me. It was evil. There was no other word for it. Sarah, I said, forcing my voice to be steady, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening? Yes. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I love Noah and Ben and Jerry and Mia. I will always love you. Then why aren't you here? Because the adults are having a disagreement about rules. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. You are perfect. But Mom said, Mom is upset. I said, and when people are upset, sometimes they say things that aren't true. But I am telling you the truth. I am working very hard right now so that I can be the best aunt I can be. Will you come to my soccer game? She asked. When is it? Saturday at 10. I looked at my calendar. I had a prep meeting for Stonebridge. I will be there. I said, I will be on the sidelines. I promise. Okay, she whispered. I love you. Aunt Claire. I love you too. Bug. The line clicked dead. I sat on my couch, holding the phone. The sorrow was there, deep and aching. But the guilt? The crushing guilt that usually crippled me? It was gone. Because I realized something in that moment. Tessa wasn't protecting those kids. She was using them as human shields. And you don't negotiate with people who take hostages. I wiped my face. I stood up. I would go to the soccer game. I would stand on the sidelines. I would wave. But I would not go back into the house. I would not open my wallet. They had crossed the final line. They had tried to break my heart to get to my bank account. I walked to my laptop. I opened the cost. I opened the smear. I created a new tab. The kids. I documented the call. October 29th. Sarah calls. Tessa told her, I don't love them because they are messy. Emotional alienation. I typed it with steady fingers. I was done drowning. It was time to build a boat big enough for the truth. And eventually, maybe big enough to pull the kids out of the water too. But first, I had to win the war, and the war was happening at the Stonebridge Community Foundation. North Ridge Mediation Services was located in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation office. The location felt appropriate. We were there to clean up a mess and audit the emotional ledger of the Wood family. I arrived 15 minutes early. The waiting room was painted a soothing, non-committal sage green, and a white noise machine hummed in the corner, masking the muffled voices from the offices beyond. I sat in a stiff armchair, my portfolio on my lap. Inside that portfolio was not a project proposal for Arbor Crest, but a proposal for my own survival. I had requested this. I had paid the retainer. When I suggested it to my parents, they had recoiled as if I had suggested a ritual sacrifice. Mediation? My mother had whispered. For families who are divorcing? For families who are breaking. I had replied. I checked my watch. 2 minutes to the hour. The door opened. My parents walked in first. Diane was wearing her Sunday church coat, clutching her purse with both hands. Gerald looked furious. His jaw set in a hard line, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for an exit. And then Tessa. She didn't look like the woman who had screamed at me in my living room. She looked small. She wore a loose gray sweater that swallowed her frame, emphasizing the curve of her pregnancy. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, and exhausted. It was a performance. I knew it was a performance because I had seen the costume change, but my parents saw only their little girl, besieged by the world. Hi, Mom. Hi. Dad, I said, standing up. Gerald grunted and sat in the chair furthest from me. Diane looked at me with watery eyes, then went to sit next to Tessa, patting her hand. "We are just so confused. Claire," Diane whispered loud enough for the receptionist to hear, "we don't understand why we need a stranger to talk to us." The door to the inner office opened. A man in his 50s with a calm, bearded face stepped out. "The Wood family? I am David. Please, come in." We filed into the conference room. It was a neutral space. Oval table, no sharp edges, a box of tissues in the center. I sat on one side. They sat on the other. The visual division was stark. David started with the ground rules. No interrupting, no name-calling. The goal was resolution, not victory. "Claire," David said, turning to me, "you requested this session. Why don't you start? Tell us what you hope to achieve today." I took a breath. I kept my hands folded on the table. I did not look at Tessa. I looked at David. "I love my sister." I began. My voice was steady, and I love my nieces and nephews. I want to be in their lives. I want to be an aunt. I paused. But for the last 7 years, I have not been an aunt. I have been a third parent, a financial backup plan, and an emotional shock absorber. I have been the default solution for every crisis, and I cannot do it anymore. Diane let out a soft, wounded sound. "I am not abandoning the family." I continued, "I am redefining my role. I want to establish a relationship that is based on structure and respect, not emergency and guilt." David nodded. He turned to Tessa. "Tessa, what do you hear Claire saying?" Tessa sniffled. She reached for a tissue. She dabbed at eyes that were already wet. "I hear that she thinks I am a burden," Tessa said, her voice trembling. She looked up at me, wide-eyed. "I know I am a mess right now. Claire, I know I am not perfect like you, but I am trying. I am alone. Dylan is trying to find steady work, but it is hard. And now with the baby coming, I just thought family was supposed to help each other." She stopped, letting the silence do the work for her. It was masterful. She hadn't addressed my points. She had just reframed the narrative. She was the struggling mother. I was the unfeeling judge. Gerald leaned forward. "See? She is admitting she needs help. Why do we need a mediator for this? You just step up, Claire, like you always have." I opened my portfolio. Because stepping up has cost me a life. Dad. I slid a document across the table to David. I slid a copy to my parents and one to Tessa. "What is this?" Gerald asked, staring at the paper as if it were a subpoena. "It is a timeline," I said. I had spent 3 nights compiling it. It was stripped of adjectives. It was just data. Page 1. The hours, 2023. Pickup logs, 140 hours of transit time. Unplanned weekend childcare, 26 weekends. Page 2. The money, direct transfers, $4,200. Groceries and supplies, $1,800. Unauthorized subscription charges, Bright Nest, $210. Page 3. The escalation. The Briar Glen Bulletin Post. The concerned professional email traced to Dylan Rourke. The call to Sarah alleging I do not love her. The room went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system. I watched them read. I saw the color rise in Gerald's neck. I saw Diane's hand fly to her mouth. I didn't include this to be cruel. I said, I included it because every time I try to set a boundary, I am told I am being selfish. I am told I don't do enough. This is what I have done. This is the reality. Tessa stared at the page with the brightness charge. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed. "You tracked it?" she said, looking up at me. "You literally sat down and tracked every dollar I borrowed? Borrowed implies a repayment plan. Tessa, you took it. And in the case of the subscription, you took it without asking." Gerald slammed the paper down. "This is petty. Claire, this is absolutely petty. You are treating your sister like a tax audit. I am treating her like an adult." I said, "It is hurtful," Diane cried. "It is so hurtful to see it written down like this, like a transaction. We are family. I realized then that they weren't shocked by the numbers. They knew I paid for things. They knew I did the pickups. They were shocked that I had broken the code of silence. By writing it down, I had made the exploitation visible. I had taken their love and showed them the bill. David, the mediator, cleared his throat. He had been reading the document carefully. Mr. and Mrs. Wood, he said gently, while the emotional impact is difficult, these are significant figures. If Claire were a professional service provider, this would be thousands of dollars in billable hours. He turned to Tessa. Tessa, looking at this list, do you have a plan for how to replace these resources if Claire steps back? Tessa crossed her arms over her chest. Protecting the bump. I don't have money for a nanny, if that is what you mean. That is why I need my sister. David nodded. Okay, let's talk about community resources. There is a grant program available through the county called the Family Stability Fund. It provides childcare vouchers for expectant mothers with multiple dependents. Have you applied for that? Tessa shifted in her chair. She looked at the table. No. David opened a folder of his own. I have the application criteria here. It could cover up to 20 hours of childcare a week. It would solve the pickup issue. He slid a brochure toward her. Tessa didn't touch it. I don't think we would qualify, she mumbled. David frowned. Based on what you have described, single income, 5 children, you would absolutely qualify. Unless there is income we aren't discussing. The air in the room changed. It went from heavy to sharp. Tessa looked at Dylan, who wasn't there, but his presence was suddenly very felt. We can't apply, she said, her voice tight. Why not? David asked. Because Dylan, he works cash jobs, sometimes, and if we put his name on the application, they check everything. They check the household income. She looked at me, defiance flashing in her eyes. We get other benefits, okay? Medicaid, SNAP. If we report Dylan's cash, we lose those. We can't have a paper trail. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach. So you are committing fraud. I said, It is not fraud, Gerald barked. It is surviving. The government doesn't care about people like us. You have to work the system. No, I said, you want me to be the system. I looked at David. He had closed his folder. As a mandated reporter in some capacities, he looked uncomfortable. I looked at my parents. They weren't embarrassed. They were angry that I had backed Tessa into a corner where the truth had to come out. I won't do it, I said. I won't do what? Tessa snapped. I won't be part of an arrangement that relies on dishonesty. I am presenting to the Stonebridge Community Foundation next month. I am liable for a massive grant. If it comes out that I am financially supporting a household that is defrauding the state, you worry about your precious reputation more than your family, Tessa shouted. Yes, I said, my voice rising for the first time. Yes, Tessa, I do. Because my reputation pays my rent. My reputation is why I have health insurance. You play with fire because you know I am there to hold the hose, but if I burn down, nobody saves us. Tessa stood up. The chair scraped loud and harsh against the floor. She wasn't crying anymore. The soft, vulnerable sister was gone. You think you are better than me, she spat. The words hung there, vibrating. That is what this is, isn't it? She leaned over the table. You sit there in your suits with your spreadsheets, and you look down on us. You think because you didn't get pregnant at 19, because you went to college, that you are the queen of the family. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You are jealous. That is the truth. You are jealous that I have a life. I have kids who love me. I have a man who wants me. You have nothing but your job and your empty apartment. You want to control me because it is the only way you feel important. I looked at the hate in her eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, rotting resentment. She hated me for the very stability she fed on. She hated me because my existence proved that her chaos wasn't inevitable. It was a series of choices. I didn't yell back. I felt a strange, sad calm. I don't think I am better than you. Tessa, I said quietly, I just think I'm finished. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out the final document. This is my offer, I said. I placed it on the table. Support plan. 90 days, 1. I will provide scheduled childcare for 4 hours, every other Saturday. Dates to be agreed upon in writing. 2. I will assist with researching legal avenues for aid that do not involve fraud. 3. I will not provide cash. I will not provide emergency pickups unless verified by a medical professional or police officer. 4. I will communicate via the group text only. This agreement expires in 90 days. If the terms are violated, or if the harassment continues, it ends immediately. I looked at them. Take it or leave it. Gerald stood up. His face was purple. You are treating your sister like a contracted employee. This is disgusting. It is a boundary. Dad, if you do this, Gerald said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl, if you walk out of here with these demands, then you are done. What does that mean? I asked. It means don't bother coming to Sunday dinner. Don't bother coming to Christmas. If you can't be a part of this family when things are hard, you don't get to be part of it when we celebrate. The threat landed. Christmas. The weapon of choice for families everywhere. The fear of being alone on the holiday. The fear of the empty chair. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. She was choosing the child who needed her, the child who kept her busy, the child who allowed her to be the martyr. She was choosing Tessa. I looked at Tessa. She was smiling. Just a little. A smirk of victory. She thought she had won. She thought the threat of exile would bring me to my knees. I thought about my quiet apartment. I thought about the work I was doing at Arbor Crest. I thought about the neighbor who talked to me about hydrangeas. I looked at my father. Okay, I said. Gerald blinked. What? I said, okay. I stood up. I gathered my papers. I didn't take the offer back. I left it on the table. If you change your minds, the offer stands for 48 hours. I walked toward the door. Claire! Diane called out, her voice cracking. You don't mean that. It is Christmas. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I love you, Mom, but I love myself enough to stop setting myself on fire to keep you warm. I walked out. I walked through the waiting room. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was shining. It was a crisp, fall day. I got into my car. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I waited for the crash. I waited for the sobbing, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt light. I had been fired from my family, or I had quit. It didn't matter. The contract was void. My phone buzzed. I looked at it, expecting a text from Gerald. It was an email from Marcus Thorne. Subject: Stonebridge presentation. Confirmed, Claire. Great news. We are on the docket. The Stonebridge public session is set for November 15th. You will be the keynote presenter for the grant proposals. The board is very interested in the community values aspect of our proposal. They want to hear about personal commitment. This is your moment. Prepare well. Marcus. I stared at the date, November 15th. It was 3 weeks away. I looked back at the mediation center. I saw my family walking out. Gerald was gesturing wildly. Tessa was checking her phone. They weren't done. I knew they weren't done. Tessa wouldn't let me go that easily, and Gerald wouldn't let his authority be challenged without a fight. But for the first time, I wasn't fighting on their turf. They were going to have to come to mine. I started the car. I had a presentation to write. The weeks leading up to the Stonebridge presentation were a strange mix of professional high and personal silence. The silence from my family was absolute. No texts, no calls, no guilt-trip voicemails. It was the silence of shunning. They were freezing me out, waiting for the cold to make me crack. But the cold felt like clarity. I filled the space with work. I met with the finance team. I met with social workers. I built a presentation that was undeniable. I wove in the data about maternal stress, about the economic impact of childcare gaps. I wrote about the reality of the village collapsing when it wasn't supported by infrastructure. I wasn't just writing a grant proposal. I was writing my autobiography in charts and graphs. I also kept my promise to Sarah. I went to her soccer game. I stood on the far side of the field, away from the parents' bench. I wore sunglasses and a hat. I saw Tessa there, sitting in a folding chair, holding court with the other moms. She looked happy. She was laughing. She was playing the role of the devoted mother perfectly. When Sarah ran onto the field, she looked around. She scanned the sidelines. I stepped forward from the tree line. I waved. She saw me. Her face lit up. She gave me a tiny, secret wave back. It broke my heart, but it also healed it. She knew I was there. I didn't have to sit next to Tessa to be present for Sarah. I left at halftime, before Tessa could spot me. 2 days before the presentation, I was in my office late at night. The cleaning crew was vacuuming the hallway. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Claire Wood? Yes, this is Marissa Keene. My stomach tightened. My attorney calling at 8 p.m. was never good news. What is it? Marissa? I just got a ping on a public record search. She said, "It seems your sister, Tessa Wood, has filed a petition." A petition for what? Indigency. She is applying for emergency county aid. But here's the thing. Claire, she listed you. She listed me? As what? As a source of household income. She put you down as a non-resident contributor to explain why she doesn't have child support orders. She is claiming that you provide, let me see here, $2,000 a month in cash support. I gripped the edge of my desk. That is a lie. I know it is a lie, Marissa said. But she put it on a government form. And because she listed you, the county might reach out to verify. Why would she do that? I asked. If they verify, they will see I am not paying it. Because she thinks you will cover for her. Marissa said. She thinks that if the county calls you, you will say yes to keep her out of trouble for fraud. She is betting your fear of her going to jail is stronger than your boundaries. I closed my eyes. She is trying to force me back in legally because she couldn't do it emotionally. Exactly. I need to stop this. Marissa, you can? Marissa said. You can file a fraud report. You can send the county your affidavit stating you provide $0. Do it, I said. Claire, if you do that, her application is denied. She could face fines. A fraud investigation. I know. And with the Stonebridge presentation in 2 days, this could get messy. If she finds out you blocked her aid, she might lash out. Let her lash out. I said, I am done being the collateral for her lies. Send the affidavit. I hung up. I turned back to my computer. On the screen was my slide deck for Stonebridge. The title slide read, Sustainable Support, Why Informal Systems Fail and Communities Must Step In. I looked at the words, Why Informal Systems Fail. I was the informal system, and I had failed, and now I was going to tell the whole town why. I saved the presentation. I went home. I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of Tessa standing on a stage, holding a microphone, telling a room full of people that I hated children. I dreamed of my father locking the door to my childhood home while I stood in the snow. I woke up on the morning of November 15th with a headache, but my hands were steady. I put on my best suit, a navy blue blazer that made me feel like armor. I put my hair up. I applied lipstick. I looked in the mirror. You are not the sister today. I told my reflection, you are the director. You are the expert. I drove to the Stonebridge Community Center. The parking lot was full. This was a big event. The foundation was giving away $1 million, and everyone in Briar Glen who mattered was here. I walked into the auditorium. It was buzzing with chatter. I found Marcus Thorne near the front. You look ready, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I am, I said. I looked around the room. I saw the mayor. I saw the school board president. I saw the wealthy donors in the front row. And then I saw them. In the third row, right in the center, Gerald, Diane, and Tessa. They weren't sitting in the back. They were front and center. They were dressed up. Gerald was wearing a tie. Tessa was wearing a maternity dress that looked modest and sweet. They saw me. Gerald nodded. A grim, stony nod. Diane looked anxious. Tessa smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of someone who has brought a grenade to a knife fight. They weren't here to support me. They were here to be seen. They were here to remind the room, and me, that the Wood family was a pillar of the community. They were here to leverage the public setting to force me into submission. If I spoke about the need for boundaries, they would look hurt. If I spoke about the failure of family support, they would look like victims. They were daring me to tell the truth in front of the people who held my career in their hands. I took a deep breath. I walked up the steps to the stage. I stood behind the podium. The lights went down. The spotlight hit me. I looked at my notes. I looked at the audience. I looked at Tessa. She gave me a little wave. I gripped the podium. "Good morning," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers. "I am Claire Wood, and I am here to talk about why love is not enough." The podium at the Stonebridge Community Center felt like the helm of a ship steering through a storm. The wood was cool under my palms, solid and real, anchoring me against the sea of faces in the auditorium. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, memorizing statistics, refining my arguments, and building a case for the maternal health partnership that was airtight. But I had not prepared for the front row. They sat there like a Norman Rockwell painting brought to life. My father, Gerald, wore his navy suit, the one he saved for weddings and funerals. My mother, Diane, was in her best floral blouse, her hands clasped demurely in her lap, and Tessa sat between them, wearing a maternity dress of soft lavender, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, looking for all the world like the Madonna of Briar Glen. They had arrived 10 minutes before the session began. They did not wave. They did not come backstage to wish me luck. They simply took their seats, front and center, establishing their presence as a silent, heavy weight. It was a tactical move. They knew that in this room, surrounded by the town's elite, the mayor, the school board, the wealthy donors of the Stonebridge Foundation, I would be constrained by social etiquette. I would have to be the good daughter. I would have to smile and acknowledge them, validating the image of the close-knit family they were projecting. If I ignored them, I looked cold. If I engaged them, I risked being pulled back into their gravity. I took a sip of water. My hand did not shake. I was done shaking. I looked at Marcus Thorne, who gave me a subtle nod from the wing. I looked at the board members of the foundation, who sat at a long table on the stage to my left. "Good morning," I said, my voice projecting clear and strong through the auditorium. "I am Claire Wood, the Associate Director of Community Outreach at Arbor Crest. I am here to talk about the gap between what we expect of families and what families can actually endure." I began my presentation. I didn't start with charts. I started with a story, not my story, ostensibly, but a composite story of the women I had interviewed. I spoke about the shadow workforce of childcare. I spoke about the aunts, grandmothers, and older sisters who fill the cracks in a broken system, providing unpaid labor that keeps the economy running until they themselves collapse. "We call it a village," I said, looking directly at the board members. "But a village has shared resources. A village has reciprocity. What we have in Briar Glen, and in towns across America, is not a village. It is a series of emergency rooms where we treat burnout with guilt." The room was silent. I could feel the audience leaning in. I spoke about the financial strain of informal guardianship. I spoke about the legal risks when caregiving is undefined. I spoke with a passion that came from the marrow of my bones. Because I wasn't just reciting data, I was testifying. I saw Tessa shift in her seat. She whispered something to my mother. Diane dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was a performance of pride. But I knew better. It was a performance of ownership. "Look at her." The gesture said, "She is ours." I finished the formal presentation 20 minutes later. This grant is not just about funding a clinic. I concluded, it is about replacing the fragile, exploitative systems of the past with sustainable, professional support, because love is an infinite resource. But time, money, and energy are not. Applause broke out. It was polite, appreciative applause. Marcus looked thrilled. "Thank you." "Ms. Wood," the board chair, A gray-haired man named Mr. Henderson said, "We will now open the floor for brief public comments or questions regarding the proposal." This was the dangerous part. Usually, public comment was boring, questions about zoning or traffic, but before Mr. Henderson could finish his sentence, my mother stood up. She didn't wait for the microphone runner. She just stood there, beaming, radiating that weaponized warmth I knew so well. "Mr. Henderson?" she called out. Her voice was sweet, trembling slightly. "Yes, ma'am? Please state your name. I am Diane Wood, Claire's mother." A ripple of charmed murmurs went through the room. How sweet. Her mother is here. I gripped the podium. "Here it comes. I just wanted to say," Diane continued, turning slightly to address the crowd, "how proud we are of Claire. She speaks so beautifully about family support because she has been such a rock for ours." She paused, wiping a tear. "We have missed her lately, as she has been so busy with this big career, stepping away from her duties at home a bit, but we know that her heart is always with family first. We know that no matter how big she gets, she will never forget that her sister and her nieces and nephews are her real job." She sat down. The room went quiet. It was an awkward silence. On the surface, it sounded like praise, but the subtext was a sniper shot, stepping away from her duties, her real job. She had publicly claimed my time. She had framed my recent boundaries as a temporary lapse caused by ambition. She had told the Stonebridge Foundation, and my boss, that my primary allegiance was to her chaos. Not to this grant, if I smiled and said thank you. I accepted the collar. I accepted that I was a rock they could grind down whenever they chose. If I snapped at her, I looked like an ungrateful daughter in front of the people deciding my professional future. I looked at the board chair. He was smiling benevolently at Diane. "That is very touching. Mrs. Wood," he said, "it is good to see strong family values." He turned to me. "Anything to add, Ms. Wood?" Time seemed to slow down. I looked at Tessa. She was smirking. It was a tiny, triumphant curl of her lip. "Checkmate," the smirk said. "You are ours." I looked at Marcus. He looked uneasy. He knew the board valued stability. If they thought I was about to be dragged back into a domestic swamp, they might hesitate to give me the directorship. I took a deep breath. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a single file folder. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. My tone was calm, professional, and devoid of the daughterly deference they expected. "I actually do have a clarification to make. It pertains to a potential conflict of interest regarding the definition of caregiver within the scope of this proposal." The room shifted. The conflict of interest phrase was a dog whistle for board members. They sat up straighter. I continued, keeping my eyes fixed on the board, refusing to look at my family. My mother is kind to offer praise. However, for the sake of the integrity of this program and my capacity to lead it, I must clarify that I am not, and cannot be, the primary caregiver or financial safety net for my sister's household. I saw Gerald stiffen. The smirk vanished from Tessa's face. I continued, my voice steady. "The proposal I have outlined today argues that informal support systems fail because they rely on undefined boundaries. To illustrate why this grant is vital, I have prepared a case study. It is a personal case study." I opened the folder. Over the last fiscal year, I have documented the hidden costs of what we culturally term family duty. This includes over 150 hours of unplanned transport time during work hours. It includes $4,000 in direct financial subsidies. It includes unauthorized recurring charges to my personal accounts for household supplies that were not mine. A gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a murmur this time. It was shock. I lifted a piece of paper. I also have here a copy of an email sent to my family members by a concerned professional, alleging I was suffering from mental instability because I established financial boundaries. This email was traced to an IP address belonging to my sister's partner. I placed the paper back on the podium. "I am not sharing this to air a grievance," I said, looking at the audience, who were now staring at me in stunned silence. I am sharing this because it is data. This is what happens when we expect women to be the infinite safety net. It creates a cycle of dependency, entitlement, and eventual collapse. I looked directly at Diane, who had turned pale, her hand covering her mouth. I cannot be the rock my mother describes, because a rock does not move, and a rock does not grow. I am a professional. I am an aunt. I am a sister. But I am not a resource to be mined until empty. And that is why this program, which replaces vague family guilt with professional, reliable care, is the only sustainable path forward. I closed the folder. Thank you. For 3 seconds, the silence was absolute. It was the kind of vacuum that happens after an explosion. Then, a woman in the back row stood up. I recognized her. She was the owner of the local bakery, a woman known for being tough as nails. She started clapping. Then the woman next to her stood up. Then Mr. Henderson stood up. The applause wasn't polite this time. It was thunderous. It was the sound of recognition. I looked out at the faces of the women in the room. Mothers, grandmothers, sisters. I saw tears in their eyes. I had said the quiet part out loud. I had broken the omerta of female sacrifice. I looked at my family. They were not clapping. Gerald was purple with rage. Diane was sobbing into her hands. But nobody was comforting her. The people around them were looking at them with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The perfect family portrait had cracked, revealing the rot underneath. Tessa was staring at me. Her face was blank, stripped of all its masks. She looked terrified. The session ended. The board members descended from the stage to shake my hand. Remarkable candor. Ms. Wood? Mr. Henderson said, gripping my hand firmly. You turned a liability into an asset. That took courage. As the crowd began to disperse, I gathered my papers. I had to walk through the auditorium to leave. My family was waiting for me in the lobby. They had cornered me near the exit doors. Gerald was pacing. Diane was wiping her eyes. Tessa was leaning against the wall, her arms crossed. You, Gerald hissed as I approached, have disgraced us. I didn't stop walking. I didn't slow down. I told the truth. Dad, you humiliated your mother. You aired our dirty laundry in front of the whole town. I didn't air it, I said, stopping to look him in the eye. I just refused to hide it anymore. You brought the laundry here. Dad, you came to the hearing. You wanted to make a scene. I just finished it. Tessa pushed off the wall. She stepped into my space. She smelled of the same vanilla perfume she always wore, but today it smelled cloying. You think you won, don't you? She said. Her voice was low, trembling with a mix of rage and panic. This wasn't a game. Tessa, there is no winning. You destroyed me in there, she said. People were looking at me like I am some kind of leech. I didn't call you a leech. I said, I listed the facts. If the facts make you look like a leech, maybe you should change the facts. She flinched. Then her eyes narrowed into slits. Well, enjoy your grant. Claire, enjoy your big job, because you are going to be enjoying it alone. She stepped closer. We are moving. I paused. Moving? Dylan has a cousin in Ohio. We are leaving next week. And since you made it so clear that you aren't part of the village, you don't need to worry about seeing the kids. Ever. It was the final card. The ace in the hole. She was threatening to erase my nieces and nephews from my life. I felt a sharp, physical pain in my chest. Sarah, Noah, Mia, the thought of them in Ohio, far away, with only Tessa and Dylan to rely on, made me sick. But I looked at Tessa. I saw the desperation in her eyes. She wanted me to beg. She wanted me to grab her arm and say, No, please, I will do anything. Just don't take them. She wanted to trade the children for my submission. If I begged now, everything I had done would be for nothing. I took a deep breath. I let the pain sit there, heavy and cold. I hope you find stability in Ohio. I said softly. Tessa blinked. She hadn't expected that. That is it? She asked. You don't care? I care deeply. I said, I love them, but I cannot stop you. You are their mother. If you think moving them to a new state away from their school and their support system is what is best for them, that is your choice. I reached into my bag and pulled out a card. It was my business card. I wrote my personal email on the back. I am not blocking you. Tessa, if you ever want to have a relationship that is based on respect, if you ever want to visit under the terms I laid out in mediation, I will be here. I will always answer the phone for the kids, but I will not buy my way into their lives anymore. I held the card out. She stared at it. She looked at her parents, waiting for them to intervene, to fix it. But Gerald and Diane were silent. They looked old. They looked defeated. They realized, finally, that the bank was closed. Tessa snatched the card from my hand. Go to hell. Claire. She turned and marched out the glass doors. Gerald and Diane followed her, casting one last look of disappointment at me before disappearing into the parking lot. I stood in the lobby alone. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. I had done the right thing. I knew I had done the right thing, but the right thing felt remarkably like heartbreak. Ms. Wood? I turned. It was a woman I didn't recognize. She was wearing a sharp gray suit and holding a tablet. She had been sitting with the Stonebridge board. I am Evelyn Vance, the executive director of the foundation. Hi, Ms. Vance. I wanted to speak with you privately, she said. Her voice was crisp but warm. We were very impressed with your presentation, but more than that, we were impressed with your integrity. She glanced at the door where my family had exited. We have had grants fail in the past because the leadership had blind spots, personal entanglements that drained the resources. You demonstrated today that you know how to protect the asset. She tapped her tablet. We aren't just going to fund the partnership, Claire. We want to expand it. We want to create a regional oversight committee for family stability programs. We want you to chair it. I stared at her. Chair it? It would be a significant promotion, and it would mean you would have the authority to set the standards for how these funds are used across the county. You wouldn't just be running a program, you would be shaping the policy. I felt a spark of something warm in my chest. It wasn't triumph, it was purpose. I would be honored. I said, Excellent. Call my office on Monday. We have work to do. She shook my hand and walked away. I walked out to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I got into my driver's seat. The silence in the car was absolute. I drove home. My apartment was exactly as I had left it, clean, quiet, organized. I took off my blazer and hung it in the closet. I poured myself a glass of water. I sat on my couch. I thought about Sarah. I wondered if she knew she was moving to Ohio. I wondered if I would ever see her graduate. I let myself cry. I cried for the loss of the fantasy that if I just gave enough, loved enough, paid enough, my family would heal. I cried for the little girl I used to be, the one who thought being good meant being used. But as the tears stopped, I felt the relief. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy coat being lifted from my shoulders. The phone wasn't ringing. There were no emergency texts, no demands, no crises. I was alone. And for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. I picked up my phone. I opened the messaging app. I didn't text the group chat. I texted Tessa directly. Tessa, I meant what I said. I love you and I love the kids. That will never change. If you go to Ohio, I hope it is a fresh start. If you ever decide you want to build a relationship based on honesty and boundaries, I am here. Until then, I am rooting for you to find your own feet, just as I have found mine. Love, Claire. I pressed send. I watched the status change to delivered. Then I put the phone down. I walked to the window and looked out at the lights of Briar Glen. Somewhere out there, families were struggling, drowning in the silence of their own living rooms. On Monday, I would start the work of throwing them a rope, a real rope. Not a lifeline made of my own veins, but a structure built to hold the weight. I took a deep breath. I was ready. Thank you for listening to My Sister Announced She's Pregnant for the 6th Time. I was so fed up with raising her kids. So This story explores the difficult reality that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I would love to hear your thoughts on Claire's decision. Was she right to expose the family secrets at the hearing, or should she have kept it private? And for those of you listening, have you ever had to fire a family member to save yourself? Please leave a comment below, letting me know where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more realistic, emotionally gripping dramas. Until next time, take care of yourselves.